The Republic of Chile, located on the western coast of South America, stretches almost the entire length of the continent, from its northern border of Peru down to the Arctic tip. It is a modern country with ancient ties, possessing beauty as diverse as its varied climates, from the dry Atacama Desert to the temperate plains of the Pampas. From the beach resort of Vina del Mar to the exhilarating snow of its numerous ski slopes. But Chile is also a country in which fundamental human rights are systematically violated. The right to freedom of opinion and expression, the right to freedom of assembly, freedom from arbitrary arrest, the right to security of person, and the right to life. According to political analyst William Ratcliffe, Chile was one of the most politically sophisticated and complex countries in the world. It had a constitution protective of individual rights, an elected Congress, a fair and impartial court system, and a long tradition of democracy, second only to that of the United States. All of it was destroyed on September 11th, 1973, when the combined military forces of Chile, under the leadership of General Augusto Pinochet, violently overthrew the government, murdering elected President Salvador Allende and many of his cabinet members.
La Junta mantendrá el poder judicial y la asesoría de la Contraloría. Las cámaras quedarán en receso hasta nueva orden. Eso es todo.
The coup, considered one of the most brutal and bloody in world history, involved more than just the Chilean military forces. It was an overthrow in which the United States was intricately entangled. Under the Nixon administration, the CIA, National Security Council, and Foreign Policy Advisor Henry Kissinger utilized over $8 million to finance covert operations meant to destabilize the Chilean political system. The money was used for bribery, propaganda, and even the abduction of a high-ranking Chilean official. Immediately following the coup, General Pinochet and his junta ruled the country with an iron fist, using violence and terror as a weapon against the people, violating every national and international human rights doctrine to which Chile had agreed, including those of the United Nations and the Organization of American States. Many arrested, often hooded and bound, are taken to houses and secret detention centers where they are held incommunicado, without the right to see or speak to lawyers, friends, or even family. With no contact to the outside world, they are left at the mercy of their captors, who subject them to brutal psychological and physical tortures, some even to the death. Over 90 organizations, including Amnesty International and the Red Cross, have documented the hundreds of savage and inhumane torture methods that continue in Chile today.
Me atrevería a decir de que en Chile ella se ha aplicado en una forma sistemática, muy selectiva y bastante sofisticada. Se combinan procedimientos de tortura física con tortura psicológica y se mantiene como un método de aplicación ordinaria en el caso de detenciones por orden política. Desde situaciones donde ella se produce en forma más bien brutal y menos sofisticada, hasta casos extremos en que la tortura ha provocado la muerte de las víctimas. Desgraciadamente en Chile existen instrumental especializado para el uso de la tortura y existen funcionarios especializados en la aplicación de la tortura.
While detained, victims are beaten, burned with acid and cigarettes, subjected to near drownings and mock executions, and electrocuted. Prisoners are forced onto the parrot's perch, which leaves the most sensitive parts of their bodies vulnerable to electrocution. Parents have even been made to witness the torture of their children. Since 1973, it has been estimated that over 150,000 Chileans have been arrested, detained, and tortured, more than 30,000 executed. Today, Chile has the highest proportion of exiles in the world. One of them is Verónica De Negri, youth counselor, human rights advocate, and spokesperson for Amnesty International.
With the coup, which was a terrible thing, I remember, was a moment at that time where, with the help of the CIA and transnational corporation, Chile was paralyzed. You didn't see people. You saw just Marines. What's my case in Valparaiso, where the coup was, that started, in fact. It was a nightmare. My house was searched that day. It was terrible. They were very crazy, kicking windows, doors to open. Always, they were feeling like you will attack, and it was very ridiculous. To me, it was like a cartoon, like a joke. You know, you are with nothing, and these men with gun machines and all these things.
Though never charged with a crime, Verónica, like many Chileans, was arrested and detained by the military forces.
The second time was the longest, and the worst. And that's what I count as a detention. It's not because the other were not human rights violation. All the times I was arrested that I can count were 7. All those times my human rights were violated. But the second time, which was the longer period, was the moment when I had all this kind of torture, the most incredible variety of torture. And that was the moment when you didn't know if you would survive or not, if you were capable to control yourself or you were capable to survive. And when I said that is because sometimes my heart was paralyzed. You have always a doctor that is there. There is a doctor that is part of the torture process, that is scientifically controlling till when they can torture in order for you to keep you alive. I know it's difficult to believe, but it's true. It is true. I remember, in fact, also when I was raped, I had this man that was touching my pulse. And I would say, okay, now, no. I remember those things. It was terrible. It was very terrible. And I think I don't know, there are many other methods of torture that is still without work, and I have very inside me that will take some more time to do it. But it took me 4 years to accept myself that I was raped. I remember when I went to United Nations to testify, the first things I did, I was sitting, and I said, I was not raped. You know, I was trying to convince myself. And the first things I did with everybody that I spoke, and they asked me about torture, I said, I was not raped. I was lucky I was not raped, which was not truth, because I was not just raped by men. I have mice. It's one of the things that I still without work at all. When I see a mice, when I see a rat, you know, when I see those kids that have these pets and are so proud, it's so terrible for me, but I have to say I'm sorry, but I can't deal with. So I have this doctor touching my pulse and saying, okay, now, it's like a competition of things. I was nothing, nobody. And after I was sent to the concentration camp, where we were 182 women, were children that born there too. It's terrible life, because in there is the first time when you start to realize how these people destroy you. When I was released, I had to go to pick up like the release form to the National Center or Release Center, something like that, which was the former Congress, see, in the place where we have our Congress. It's like the capital here. Now it's functioning in Chile. An office where they have the control of all the prisoners. So I went there, and the man that gave me the certificate, which was a fake certificate too, let me tell you why. Because only accept the days that I was arrested in Santiago, but all the other months that I was disappeared doesn't show there. Doesn't say the day I was arrested. It said there that I was arrested in March 8th, 1976, which was not truth. So all the other 6 months where I have the most incredible things doesn't exist in paper. So it's a lie. Okay, this man gave me this certificate that said that nothing against me, that I'm free. But he said, you have 2 months to leave the country, or next time you won't be alive.
In 1977, Veronica arrived in the United States with her 2 young children, Rodrigo and Pablo.
Rodrigo was a very special kid. He was very, very bright, really bright. Here we have a lot of problem with him, especially with the history teachers or the current affairs teachers, because they were talking about how good United States was with the third world countries, and his experience was terrible. He couldn't forget that his family was destroyed, because his family was not just mom and brother. His family was my mother, all his brothers, and my brother's sister, his new cousins, nephews, and things like that. It was the whole family, and that was destroyed. The kids didn't understand what he was talking about, so he felt very isolated. He never said openly anything to me, but I saw when he was growing more that all the love and respect he had for me was sort of missing that part, that he started to be angry with me and bitter because I couldn't go back, so he has to stick here. But I don't think he really enjoyed exile.
In May of 1986, after 9 years of life in exile, Rodrigo returned to Chile.
He went there for many things. He has to see his country. He wants to know his country. because he really felt Chilean. He really, really felt Chilean. Unfortunately, they didn't give time to him to see everything he wanted to see.
Mr. President, distinguished members of the Human Rights Commission, my name is Carmen Gloria Quintana. I am a 19-year-old Chilean college student who 8 months ago was savagely beaten and burned alive by Chilean soldiers. I am here today to report what happened and denounce before this commission the constant violation of human rights in my country. Mr. President, on July 2nd of 1986, I participated in a national strike called for by the Civilists' Assembly. Also present was Rodrigo Rojas De Negri, a 19-year-old photographer, resident of the United States, and son of a Chilean exile who returned to his country to find his roots. We were on our way to a demonstration in town when a civilian vehicle filled with a military patrol in combat uniform, heavily armed, faces black with combat paint, followed us down the street. They stopped Rodrigo and I and immediately accosted, searched, and brutally beat us. Then 2 other vehicles arrived, raising the number of our aggressors to more than 30. One of the men carried a can of combustible fluid. Rodrigo was already semi-conscious because of the brutal kicks, punches, and beatings from truncheons. As they continued beating me, the military chief started to douse us from head to toe with the combustible fluid. Despite my pleas, because it was getting into my mouth, all of the soldiers made fun of us. While I was cleaning my mouth with my hand, they threw something that exploded between Rodrigo and I, and we ignited like human torches. I started to jump and wallow on the ground, trying to extinguish the flames, when a soldier struck me on the mouth with his rifle butt, knocking out several teeth. Witnesses said later that they left us burning for several minutes. Almost unconscious, I remember that they wrapped us up in blankets and threw us like sacks into a vehicle. After, they flung us in a ditch 14 miles from where it happened, in open country. I woke when I felt the touch of a totally disfigured man, his face scorched, with open wounds, white lips, and blood flowing from his nose. It was Rodrigo. We got out of the ditch with open wounds on our arms and legs and walked with difficulty like zombies to look for help. Several cars turned away, terrified at the sight of us, until a man assisted us and called the police, who took more than 2 hours to get us to a public hospital. There, we were diagnosed as having second and third degree burns over 62% of our bodies.
In Chile, a resident of Washington, D.C. has died of burns after he was allegedly set on fire by soldiers last week. 19-year-old Rodrigo Rojas was taking photographs during an anti-government demonstration in the capital of Santiago when he was reportedly seized by an army patrol. He's the 8th person to die since last week's 2-day general strike against the military rule of General Augusto Pinochet.
With the aid of the U.S. State Department, Veronica was permitted to enter Chile temporarily.
When I went back, was in the worst way any human being would like to go back to the country, to see die one of your kids. It's very terrible because no one terror film can describe what I live. When you are struggling to get the medicine for your kid and the hospital is depriving your kid to receive that. They were not in the proper hospital. In the case of Rodrigo, I can practically assure that, by example, when his lung was collapsed, was not a casual thing, was a clear thing to exterminate his life. Look, the difference, why they're trying to create difference, also to create problems in between Carmen Gloria's family and me. Carmen Gloria was always in the burned unit of Posta Central, which Rodrigo was not, was taken away to another unit that was not any condition of asepsia. That is the most important condition, has to be for a burned person, especially with the burnings that Rodrigo had, 65% of his body. Plus his respiratory system being burned. His ears, nose, whatever. It was really a terror scene for me. I remember when I went to pay for the cask for Rodrigo, when they gave you all these incredible selections, which to me was ridiculous to do those selections. First of all, because I don't have money. So we choose for the cheapest cask. Also because why Rodrigo have to be different from the others that were skilled, that were poor people. And he was with the white sheet cover, but also I asked to be covering his, I didn't want the people to see his face because it was very strong. And the man told me, you don't have right to the car that usually accompany, I'm forgetting English in this moment. It's the company of the funeral, you know, the usual car where the family goes. And I said, why not? He said, because this is a conflicted funeral. All the funerals where the victims are victims of the government are called conflicted funerals, and we don't put the car to them because the cars are destroyed. And you have to be very aware you will have the worst, how you said, the car that is carrying the cars? Yeah. And I was, my goodness, what is this? So you are being repressed in every single thing. But I never realized the meaning of the funeral until I was there. In Chile, the only way to express are the funerals. But it's important for everybody, and for the mothers, the women's. The women of the disappeared that feel like they are attending the funeral of their loved one. Other women that never were able to make a funeral for their kids because it was were the worst moments of the repression, early 1973 through 1980, where people really couldn't do funerals. Youth is there because that funeral for them have the connotation of their own funeral that maybe could be the next day. And all the funerals is provocation, is repression, is a misrespect to the people, the person that died, and to the last one. I saw those kids fighting for the casket when the police took away. Fighting with nothing, with the hands, you know. All the police very well armed, very well covered. Water cannons, tear gases. I never paint in my mind the meaning of a funeral till I saw Rodrigo's funeral, until I lived them. I'm not the kind of silent parent. Some parents hide in their homes and cries, and it's a very respectful thing too. But I'm fighting. I won't have kids just to be killed and destroyed.
Eastern Flight 158 arrived at National Airport today with Verónica De Negri on board. The Chilean exile, who has been living in Washington for the past 9 years, was returning from Chile, where she attended the funeral of her 18-year-old son, Rodrigo Rojas.
Burns were very extensive, but fortunately his feet were in good condition and was our way to communicate. He couldn't speak with me, but I remember he was turning his toes to hug me. He didn't want I leave him, but I was not allowed to stay.
Despite her grief, De Negri paid tribute to her son and again lashed out at the Chilean government headed by Augusto Pinochet.
He's a criminal. He lied. He never had his hand cleaned. He never had his soul clean. I'm a poor woman that struggled for survive for me and my kids. But I'm clean.
Rodrigo Rojas, a former student at Woodrow Wilson High School, died on Sunday. Witnesses say Rojas and an 18-year-old woman were doused with gasoline and set afire by Chilean troops. Verónica De Negri says her son was armed only with a camera.
He wanted a picture to the world, the suffering, the poverty. He always believes in human rights. He always was concerned about the suffering of the people.
During funeral services on Wednesday, military troops fired water cannons and tear gas into the crowd. Verónica De Negri today called on the Reagan administration to end support and loans to Chile and to insist upon a thorough investigation of her son's death.
Did you try to stop him from the gun?
No. No. That's a question many people is doing to me. And without being irrespectful, but I think it's the dumbest question you can do a human being. How I will keep my son to go to a place that was his dream? He has to face by himself what was the reality of Chile. He has to stop the dream of the Chile he had. Because for him, everything was Chile. He has to give another look. Plus, if the life was insecure in there, I said before too, here is not secure either. The thing is, people don't ask why people has to be killed because they want to be in their country.
2 years after the incident, the families of Los Quemados, the burned ones, are still seeking an extensive investigation and justice, despite the many problems created by the dictatorship's judiciary system.
In Chile, most cases are referred to the military courts once if they involve any military personnel, and of course they're then judged by people who are on active military duty. When the officers hearing the cases at times have made steps towards being impartial and fully investigating matters, they have been removed from office. Witnesses have been abused in Chile. In this case in particular, at least 4 of the witnesses have had to flee Chile. The Vicaria lawyers who have volunteered the services to the families of the victims have received numerous death threats. And in fact, Luis Toro was subjected to an attempted kidnapping at his home in the middle of the night. Hector Salazar received a letter in the mail that said, "You'll be Quemados number 3, and have had to put in special security measures in their homes in order to avoid abuse by groups which, from all information available, seem to be linked to the security forces of the Republic of Chile. There will be no justice for her or Carmen Gloria in Chile as long as General Pinochet or the other members of the military junta, which now rule the country, stay in power." That is confirmed by everything I've seen in Chile and all the reports in which I've read about Chile. She will not receive justice in Chile until the government changes.
I remember this morning I was in between 9 and 11:30 when I got up. I was trying to control myself in my feelings because tomorrow Rodrigo will be 21 years old, if he is alive. And I was thinking that I'm here, that I'm very far away, that I cannot go to the cemetery to put the flower to him, that I have to conform myself to look at the picture, that I would like to do something big, big, big for his birthday, because he will be an adult, a man. But I'm thinking in the joy of each parent when their kids have a new birthday, and I cannot enjoy. So that my human rights is being violated. That I'm not being respected. That he died, he was killed, brutally killed. And apparently I'm safe here in this country. But I'm not, because emotionally I'm very affected. I'm really, really affected. I feel like I'm not with the physical torture, but the emotional, the psychological torture that I have is terrible. It's terrible for me to know that I'm a Chilean, but I cannot live in Chile. That I can be applying to be American citizen, but that's not the story. I want to go to Chile.
They take you beyond. For all that they are doing, there's no way to respond.